Hi there. In this screencast, we're going to adjust the rear suspension. Earlier on in the creation process, we didn't really know what to do with it, so we just sort of set it aside. I'm going to start by toning down the color of this armor, so it's not in our way as much. And then we can address this suspension unit. Now this shock is, let's see, I think I got it from one of my other motorcycles. I'm not sure this is the shock that the Buell actually comes with. But I do have it grouped into its own object right there, the shock unit. So we can move it around as a unit and sort of see where it goes. Now originally on this machine it's sort of central, sort of in the center of the machine, but we can't have it there anymore. So first thing I'm going to do is move the axis of this group so that it is at one of the pivot points of the shock down there. So that's going to allow us to easily rotate the shock about that axis after we've sort of figured out where it needs to be. Now, the mechanics of the suspension on this machine can be sort of strange. We don't really need to play by the rules because, well, it's a fictional machine. So we can put the shock somewhere where it wouldn't really make sense in real life, but that would still be unrealistic. So I'm going to try to put it somewhere where it does make sense. And it looks like I should probably mount it with the reservoir at the top, like it is in most of the cases. So I'm just going to rotate it 180 degrees so that the reservoir points outward, like that. And we can sort of mount it outboard to the side like this, now that those kickstands are sort of facing outward and sweeping away a little bit more. But if we bring it forward and then rotate it like that, I think that works. So the idea is here that the place where the suspension normally lives is just crowded with too many components. We can actually scale this down a little bit as well. There's no rule saying we can't do that. So it's right there. Maybe we can move it inboard a little bit. We could cut the fairing a little bit. Okay, I'm happy with that scale. So let's look at this fairing. This cowling can just be cut. So let's say that we needed to. Looks like the tail is still a symmetry object. So cutting this would mean we have to take it out of symmetry, and I'm not ready to do that just yet, but we can cut it in the future. What I will do is create a bracket on the swing arm. Now, because the Buell houses its fuel in the swing arm, we're going to want to be careful. Sorry, not its fuel, its oil. We're going to want to be careful about this. Now again, it's just, it's a fictional bike, so it doesn't have to be real. And we can modify the swing arm in any way we want. So the first thing I see I'm going to do, it looks like we have some extra edges down here. And I don't think we need those. So we can just weld that. And weld that. So that creates a much simpler structure for us to work with here. And what I can do is I can use the path selection tool to just select this path, and then I can move it. I'm going to use the Kayama slide plugin, and that way we can just slide it down below the shock mounting point. In case you missed that, I just slid the edge down a little bit. So now that the edge has been slid like that, we can actually select the loop of edges that it belongs to. So we have that loop selected all the way around, and then we can do a bevel to create a pair of edges instead. So what does this give us? Well, it gives us extra geometry right below the mounting point, but it also gives us a really easy way to break this off and extend it. So here's what I'm thinking. Right now we have 3 edges, 1, 2, 3. there's nothing that says those edges have to be where they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these edges where I want them. So if we scale them out like this, and I'm just going to go to point mode to get a little bit more granularity in my selection. And so we can do that. So now we can actually make a square shape out of them. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to move this edge down a little bit. And then we have these two polygons. If I wanted to make a shock mounting point out of those, the easiest way is from the top. So I'm going to go to the top, and I'm going to see my polygon right here. Now what I can do is I can select those 3 points and scale them down on the Z. Select these 3 points back here, scale them down on the Z, and do the same thing with the other points except for the X. So what I'm doing is I'm just basically turning them into a regular grid. I'm sort of aligning them with the world grid. So now they're very straight, and we can actually now squash them on the Y, and we actually have a perfect square. So we can now move this square right up here and possibly rotate it so it doesn't stretch so much. And now we have a sort of a solid substrate that we can extrude to get our mounting point. And I'm just gonna eye it and sort of make this in the center. And once that's there, we can go from the side view and we can see what we're about to do. We're just going to extrude until we get a nice big mounting point right there. And then we can select, using the path selection again, just select these edges up here and do a bevel to make it a rounded mounting point. And if we wanted to make this transition smooth, we can use Kayama slide to stretch that out a little bit. Do it in the front as well. Now, in doing all of this, we have left the geometry around it a little bit messy, so let's clean that up. Using the regular slide tool, I'm going to slide this edge back up to where we found it. And I'm going to use the point slide tool to slide that back up as well. And we can slide this edge in a little bit to get that sort of Phong shading back. Although it does look kind of weird going from straight to shaded. So I'm not sure how to handle that. Let's just leave it like this for now. Maybe we can bring it down like that. And sort of preserve the hard edge all the way down. Or at least delay it. That doesn't look very good. I suppose we could just bevel that edge as well. So I think the easiest way to do that, let's hide the shock unit. Is to actually use the knife tool and try to continue this up. So I'm just going to make some temporary cuts here. And once they're in place, let me see what I've got. I've got more of a region that I can use for this smooth transition. And so now I can actually just select these edges right around the top here, and I can move it along the X until it shades. And now I have that smooth transition coming all the way up and going over. Looks like we can probably stretch these out a little bit too to make the transition a little bit more gradual. So now if we look at it, it just looks like we have an extra mounting point. So it is weird that we have this ridge here. We can fix that by spacing these out. It looks like we've broken the shading here. Probably need to move this in a little bit more. There we go. I'm not sure where this came from. This may have been an error, so we can just delete that and fill the hole. And on the back side here, we can just remove the n-gons, and we're done. We now have a more worthy mounting point for our shock. And of course, there's a bunch of tweaks we can make to the actual shock unit to make this look a little bit better. We can move it in like that, and we can scale down this bracket. And then this bolt. I'm trying to find the best way to scale this. It's got a lot of pre-made geometry in here, so I don't want to mess much of that up. Let's just select these polygons on the inside, and then gross selection. Scale it down, make it a little bit fatter. And we can then go back to this bolt and just squash it a little bit. Good stuff. Could probably rotate this spring now that we're seeing the wrong side of it. And we can mount that up there later on, but for now I think the shock finally has a home. Only took 21 episodes. Alright, so that's it for the shock unit. You know, I was looking at the tail up here, and this is where a lot of instrumentation is going to go. We're probably not going to want this nice ergonomic curve here. We're probably going to want to get rid of that. So let's do this. Let's select the tail. So let's see if there's an easy way to delete these. If I do a loop selection of these polygons, it goes all the way to the edge, and I can probably just use the fill selection to select the rest. And delete. So now that we have that, we'd probably want some sort of a surface in here to mount instruments on. But we can just select this cavity here. I'm just gonna do a control scale to get some more geometry. And then push it down so we can get a nice lip to work with. And once we have this, we're probably going to want to go to the center line and zero things out again, because I have messed up the symmetry weld. So to fix that, we just go to the rectangular selection, and we just select those points, and we set their position to 0, and their size to 0, and hit apply. Now it looks like its object should be to the world, so the position was a bit off. Hit apply. And while we have these selected, we can also say optimize, and it gets rid of all of the orphaned points. Great. So now we can actually put a platform in there to mount instrumentation on, because no doubt this is going to be sort of part of the nerve center of the bike. So the easiest way to get a plate there is just to use a cube. So we just add a cube there, scale it down. Once we have the cube in place, we can actually start to modify it if it doesn't fit properly. So we're going to widen it all the way out. Now that it sort of fits the extents that we want, we can hit C to make it a editable object, and then use our knife tool in loop mode. Just add a few loops. So we're going to want a loop probably right there, another one right there. Now that we have these loops, we can actually just select the faces or the loops themselves and scale down, move it in. You see this loop here should have been more forward. Like that. And this loop here can go in. We can select the polygon face at the rear and do the same thing. And by adding one more loop right there, we can sort of complete this platform that we've created. So we can mount instrumentation there instead of a passenger. You know, it may even look more high-tech. Let's try this. What if we selected these faces and then just move them up so that they actually protrude, and we zeroed the rotation of this cube's axis only, and then we can scale this down flat. Move it up like that. I'm not sure I like that, but it does look more practical. It looks more modular, like it was sort of hacked together like these machines are. I do like that though. That looks pretty good. So let's start making some modifications here. Just moving all this stuff down. And we can select the tail again. I think we want to move some of these points down. And then this cube, we want to be a little bit more careful about how we scaled these loops. We may need an extra loop now that things are exposed and out in the open. So it seems that now we have this platform for instrumentation. We've been neglecting the rear of the bike a lot, and there's going to be telemetry there. There's probably going to be some more has cams back there, and some antennas for GPS radios. There's actually going to be GPS radios all over the bike, I think. GPS receivers, rather. I'm not sure GPS radio is the correct term. So we can just bevel the edge of this to make it a little bit more gentle. But notice that because of this edge right here, it doesn't bevel properly. So we can just get rid of that edge for now. Do the actual bevel operation. And then we can retriangulate those. I think I like the way Cinema 4D has retriangulated it, so let's use that. Alright. So I think that's enough for this time. I really hope you enjoyed this screencast. And if you have any suggestions, feedback, I'd love to hear it. So until next time, see ya.